welcome to this video. I am going to be doing kind of a video where I will be showing the books that I am planning on reading the next coming days. And I have a whole pile here actually. I'm gonna show you. So I'm gonna show you the books that I am going to be reading, and I actually today finish all the 8 courses that I have had in the university for this spring. So I'm very happy about it. I submitted the final thesis today and alhamdulillah, you know. So I'm actually drinking some black tea with vanilla, and I have, since I was in North Sweden, I have really been enjoying vanilla tea. So I have both the green tea and the black tea, and I have it in a glass jar. So this one is actually for kombucha, but I have just refilled and reusing this bottle with some vanilla tea, so it's really good. So as I said, during Ramadan, as I know some people are, you know, sort of enjoying the holy month of Ramadan currently, I actually last year was in Jordan during Ramadan, and I can show some stuff that I got today. So these are actually apricots, and they have really nice type of color, orange. And last Ramadan I actually learned that in Arabic apricots are called mishmish. So apricots in Arabic is called mishmish. So I have actually been really fortunate during this Ramadan to type on a paper about Al-Ghazali, who was living during the 1000th century, and he was a Sufi, university professor, lecturer. He was lecturing basically, and he was philosopher, theologian, and he was, you know, very versatile in what he was doing as a sort of occupation, you know, and he was a Muslim as well. So I've been typing on a paper about how he was, because he actually wrote 40 different sort of literature works, and all these books are still quite of interest for readers today, because the content is somehow relevant for people even in contemporary timing and, you know, in different contexts and societies. And I've been typing on some form of ethical principle that is found within most religions, and Al-Ghazali was apparently sort of inspired by this ethical principle when he was writing, and I've been analyzing some text by him where and how he sort of has weaved in this principle into his texts, and also in relation to the fact that this principle, ethical principle, has to do with sort of quite something that is relevant to the contemporary society in Europe in general, because there is quite a lot of exophobia going on among, you know, in the population. People are kind of afraid of other people, and yeah, anyway, so I was fortunate to, you know, read some of these texts that he has written, and it was, yeah, it was really you know, sort of a blessing for Ramadan to do that, I would say. So this pile of book is going to be very mix of books. So as I said, I have finished my spring term now, and for the rest of this week I am going to be working with a summer course that is about medicine and power. So I have a ton of different literature for that, and I have 5 different papers to type for that course. So, and I have the instructions and stuff for that, so I'm gonna try and start with that this week. So yeah, let's start with the pile of books. So also I have another thesis that I'm partly going to be doing during the autumn of 2019, which is now spring 2019, in case you will be watching this one later on. But I'm going to be having some yoga in that thesis. So therefore I actually picked up this book, which is called Sankara on the Yoga Sutras. So Sankara was a yoga practitioner, and he made some comments on the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that Patanjali was alive approximately 200 years before Christ was born. And he was living in a Indian context, so with Hinduism and Buddhism. And he was practicing yoga, and he wrote these Yoga Sutras, which are sort of covering the consciousness and philosophy, Indian philosophy, Hindu type of philosophy, and Buddhist. You know, it's linking to all these things, and these Yoga Sutras are still sort of spreading across the world, because a lot of people in Europe and in the US have sort of, you know, picked up a yoga practice all of a sudden, and they are sort of reading the Yoga Sutras. So it's quite interesting to know what these Yoga Sutras actually are saying. So therefore I took this book from the library, and also I started to read this one, and in the last weekend I was actually reading a translation of all of the Yoga Sutras, and they are really interesting to read. Gives a lot of inspiration and, you know, I mean, a perspective on some stuff that has to do with consciousness and just life in general. The second book that I have here is completely different, or at least to some part it is different, and it is called Strategy Book, and it is written by someone who is named Max McKeown. I don't know how to say his name. And he's an author and philosophical doctor with towards strategy, and he has been quite successful as a lecturer, like lecturing basically, and he has also been doing consultation with companies such as Microsoft and Toyota and Topshop, which are quite big companies in general. And I really like his way of writing, because it's very like hands-on advices and information. It's so easy to take what he says in this book and apply it to life from an individual perspective, and from a company perspective, or from a management perspective, or from whatever perspective basically. So definitely recommend this one, and I'm almost halfway through this one, so I'm just gonna finish this one. And then the third book that I have here, I think I have showed this book before, but actually I have later this week I'm gonna make a presentation about this book at the university. So this one is called Formations of the Secular Christianity, Islam and Modernity by Talal Asad. And this book is just giving some ideas by taking example from the history, and sort of highlighting how we can perceive secular contexts. You know, what are the characteristics of secular context and stuff. And it's quite important to have the understanding of that in order to be able to, you know, view the differences between secular and religions, for example, and what are the, how can you even study something that is secular when you are living in that context, and if you're not paying attention to what actually is meaning by secular and so forth. So I'm gonna make a presentation about this book later this week, so I'm just gonna flip through the book again so I can sort of make some interesting points in that presentation. And then to a completely different topic, or switching over to something more spiritual, I have this book which is called Sufism, and an essential introduction to the philosophy and practice of the mystical tradition of Islam by Ernst. I don't know how to say his name. Anyway, he has a PhD, so it's not just something random, you know, he is actually, you know, he has been doing the, you know, levels in the university. And I was referring to some stuff out of this book when I was typing on something, you know, earlier this week. And it actually is really interesting because he actually explains some aspects of rituals within Sufism. And for those who don't know anything about Sufism, it is basically about having experiences that are giving some perspective on connection with something that is higher than the human consciousness and stuff, you know. So yeah, it's just interesting, and it has to do with Islam, but actually Sufism has been quite widespread throughout different you know, different individuals in different contexts, because it's more like focused on inward experiences, so such experiences that you would have when you are doing meditations and stuff, which is not just about the borders over different religions, but more about the internal experiences that a person can have. So quite interesting book. And then continuing within the Sufism, I have Rumi, which was a poem writer in the sort of 1200th century, like 1200, in that time frame, you know. And this one is called Signs of the Unseen. And this one I haven't started to read it, but I know that Rumi is very famous for his poems, and he has quite a lot of readers in the Europe and US context. And I have some poem books about like written by Rumi, but this one I'm really looking forward to read this one, especially during Ramadan. So the next book that I have is completely different. It is about accounting and financing. So this one is written by a Swedish author, or actually by a couple of authors, but I have been studying some business in the university, and this one is more like building on to the business that I already have studied in the university. So I thought that this one was quite handy because it's not so extensive in the sort of amount of text, and yeah, and I'm just wanting to sort of maintain the stuff that I already have learned about accounting, and you know, sort of bringing in the more financing aspect to it as well. So I'm gonna try read this one as well during the coming days. And then this is almost the last book. This one is called Public Management, and this one is specifically for a more Swedish type of public management perspective and stuff, you know. So it has to do with changes, renewals, and new leadership or management ideals. So very interesting book. It is quite a lot tying into the stuff that I am studying in my master program, and I'm gonna try and read this one also the coming days, because definitely something I'm interested in, and I have been reading quite a lot about policy making and so forth when it comes to health, and this is quite important to know some more about public management here, basically. So the last book that I have is one book that I just picked up from the library because I was reserving this book, and this one, I don't know what it is about, to be fairly honest, at all, but I have heard so many I have heard so much people talk about this book, and since I haven't read it myself, I can't really give any arguments or opinions about it. But so now I actually was picking up this book, and it is called The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. And as I said, I have no idea what this book is about, as far as that I think it has to do with some verses in the Quran that has been sort of discussed or something, you know. So yeah, so anyway, I'm just gonna read this one, and then I might can do some book recension on it or something. I also have one more book, but I need to get it from my shelf, basically. So one more book that actually Barack Obama also has given an opinion on, which is quite, you know, hands down for that. It's called Factfulness, and this book was recommended to me by a professor that I have currently been having in a course on master level, and it's very like easy, you know, format on this book, and it's super lightweight. So I'm like, this is the perfect book to put in a handbag if you are like, you know, using some transportation to get to work or wherever you might be going. And it's called Factfulness, 10 Reasons We Are Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think. And it is a combination of Hans Rosling, Ola Rosling and Anna Rosling Rönnlund, who has put together this book. And it's basically just explaining some different relevant and actual topics in the contemporary timing by using statistics and in a very easy type of manner, sort of, you know, giving examples and really hands-on and simple explanation on things, you know, in a very kind of informative and interesting way. Hans Rosling is not alive anymore, but he has written basically part of this content, and I was reading this one, I don't know when it was, because I actually purchased this book, and I was reading some pages in it, and it really had some interesting type of example that it was providing along with some of the more statistical and informative type of content. And yeah, this is a really interesting book if you want something easy going to read, but still like uplifting about the world, and yeah, and still it's like, you know, giving really like facts about things, you know, how they sort of are based on statistics and stuff, you know. And Barack Obama has also put some words on this book, so that's not too bad, you know. So I think those are all the books that I had to show, and I'm gonna take some vanilla tea here. So those were all of the books, and as I said, I am so happy I have finished this whole spring term with my 8 courses, and I'm just now going to start up with some new stuff. And as I showed, I have this pile of books to go through the coming days, even if I have sort of read some of them, but not all of them. So I hope that was sort of inspiring you to pick up a book, maybe as well, if you know, taking part in Ramadan. So I'm gonna end this video here, and